So now let's take a look at how we can bring over all the different surfaces, for example, the window. And actually, I would like to start with the wheel because what you see here is my revised computer model with my car body. Oh, I don't like this part. Yeah, this is better now. I forgot to push this one up. And this computer model has, as you can see, all the different creased edges just beveled. And then based on how tight I want those the surface to flow, I put those loop cuts closer together, for example here, or for example further apart, like here, and also kind of like if I make this one high, the front part is nice and creased. You can see how the surface goes over the wheel and then stops somewhere there. So I have like a triangular part there. And if I want to get this even super crisp, I could, for example, add another loop cut. So I have 3 in between, and because they're very close, it just tightens it really, really nice. But the problem is without using the edge creasing, you also end up with problems like here where you can see that the surface is round. And well, I could go into Fusion, import this mesh, turn it into T-spline, then with T-spline crease this edge and then actually export it or convert it to B-Rep. But since we're in Blender here, we can just prepare all the geometry, so I don't even have to do these tasks in Fusion, because in this process it would be a little bit unnecessary. And remember that for the Blender demo, I had somewhere, yeah, here it is, this front wheel cleanup. So for example, let's take a look, and I can see that it intersects this quite well, but not 100% on there. So what I'm going to do now is actually, I'm selecting this cylinder, setting my 3D cursor to the cylinder center, switch my pivot point to 3D cursor, going to edit mode, and then maybe select those points. And actually by hand I adjust those a little bit, and then scale Shift Y, so I scale along Z and X, shrink it in a little bit till, for example, everything starts to intersect there. And maybe just to tighten this and just give it a small loop cut, because all the stuff actually I will trim off. So perfect. Okay, so I created the surface on purpose a little bit bigger because I know when I bring this into Fusion, I have extra flash, which I can trim away by utilizing this cylinder. So let's go ahead and do this. Also, a small heads up, you see the cylinder is made out of 8 points. So everything that is bigger than 6 points will turn more into a perfect cylinder. If you make a circle, for example, with 4 points, this, for example, is not going to turn into a perfect circle. So you see that it looks more rectangular with rounded edges. So whenever you create geometry in Blender, when you want to cut something, maybe 8 points or 12 points, the more points you have, then when we bring it into Fusion and T-splines, the better the ring will really be circular. Okay. This one I turn the subsurface off, edge split I turn off, subsurface I turn off. Of course, the mirror I leave on. So all this I would like to bring over. So I select those two, File, Export, OBJ. And selection only, apply modifier, go and export, have my scale correctly. And then let's go to Fusion, insert mesh. Let's see where it is. There it is. Open. So, and in this mesh body, I select, right click, convert to T-spline. Takes a second. And T-splines understand that there are actually two different objects inside. So the wheel cap or the wheel tube, and for example, the car body. And then we can select those two objects, convert them to a VREP face. Oh, here's some craziness happening, so I might later have to see if maybe I can simplify that mesh a little bit, because those parts here are okay. This, however, is not. Let me quickly take a look. Oh, I'm not really sure actually why this happens, because oh, there's a triangle. Gotcha. Okay, so merge at center. Let's see if I have something else somewhere. Okay, so this car body, then I export a second time. Go to Fusion. Okay, now this body we delete. So pay attention to when you bring those objects over, if there are some crazy lines on your surface, and if, like in this case, you see that, go back and try to identify what caused it, fix it, and then simply bring it back, and then apply the different conversion steps. Okay, Fusion is working. There's my T-spline object, and yeah, this one looks better now. And convert. So, for example, the nice thing about NURBS is, because this is all more mathematically based now, those are, as you can see, different surface patches. Through the math, I can calculate how, for example, certain parts intersect, and where they intersect, I can then tell the software, hey, cut it. So I go to the patch mode, go to trim. So my trim tool is going to be my cylinder, and I go to a front view, so I can look right in here and, for example, select this part of my car body that penetrates into the cylinder. So you know this is red, and then click OK, and it's gone. Let's do it a second time, for example, for this part. Okay, so you see, this way I ended up with really nice crisp designs or edges. So I created a little bit more material in Blender and then brought it over into Fusion, and then started the more precise cutting there. So for example, this doesn't look too bad. Okay, so that was very easy. Let's go to Blender. And let's take a look at those windows. So there are now multiple ways how we can do this. And let me select all those, press I and H. So I have here, for example, my car body in the back. Oops, wrong one. Still projecting on this one. And I would like those windows to cut out. Now, I modeled those by hand, and there are multiple ways now how I can easily, for example, cut everything out. The easiest way would be to create, for example, a cylinder that penetrates completely through it, so I can cut everything out. Same with here, but again, I'm using edge creasing to a certain degree, so I'm going to run into some problems here, but that's not really a problem. And also, let's say I really would like to have very perfect and even flows of those lines, because currently those windows are quickly hand modeled and they're not really very accurate and clean. For example, you can see here's a little bit more space between this black part than here. So this idea to bring this over into Fusion and to cut it is, in my opinion, not really suitable. But there's a different approach. Let me show you what I'm going to do. So this surface, I'm going to duplicate. No, hold on. Actually, I make it different. Let's apply some good best practice. I'm going to select those surfaces here, just those edges. And you will see in a second what the reason behind this is. So I duplicate, Shift D, press Escape, press P, put it into a separate object. And there are those lines. Let's go into edit mode, select everything, and turn off the edge creasing. So here are my lines. So the lines basically are sampled from my car body. So I'm starting to work with curves a little bit. They go into all directions. So to clean this up a little bit, I select them all, press S, Y, and 0, and maybe move them away a little bit. So I have kind of like something like this. And then actually with those curves, I can press E and Y, press E, scale and Y to 0. Yeah, what are you doing? Hold on. Okay, not sure. Oh, yeah, makes sense. The 3D cursor has to be my scale 2 target. So E, S, Y, 0. There we are. Okay, so basically now I created a plane that would cut through my car, and it's actually making use of some of the geometry or edges I sampled from the car. So what's the whole point behind this? It's actually very, very simple, and you will see this just in a second. And that's also the way how, for example, you would then create geometry which you would project onto something by using like a strict NURBS approach. So maybe those parts here I currently just hide. So if I, for example, give this surface now an offset, so I solidify, I have to adjust the normals because as you can see, the normals are not all organized. Flip those. or like the rim effect to be turned off. And then you see now, the more I increase, for example, the value, I can actually make really nice curve offsets into the mirror line. So instead of trying to build each individual window by hand, I try, for example, to have a nice and precise surface offset, because you will see I'm going to use those as trim surfaces. So for example, all those define now the, how could I say that, the lower edges of my windows. Okay, so this step is good. But now my windows also have vertical lines. So what I do, I simply add a plane. For example, rotate it and then place those planes simply where, for example, my windows would have kind of like a separation. And maybe here in the front, there's another one. This one I have to rotate like this. Okay. The back is a little bit tricky because this is rounded, but that is not really a problem. So what we do, instead of having just a flat surface, we simply will create us a surface that is rounded or arced. So for example, this part I move down to here. And then I have to see maybe how I have to lay out my geometry least amount of points as possible, so you have nice and even curves. The more points, the easier you can make the curves crooked or uneven. So, okay. Let's shade this one smooth. And I will utilize part of my car body actually to carve those windows out. And then also the other parts. And then here, for example, there is a small part for the handle. So I do this as well. Rotate, maybe scale along the x-axis. E, so I'm scaling this down. SX, try to hit the right angle, delete that face. And I notice this one is a little bit up. This one is a little bit down. See, this way I have the correct connection. Okay. And, oh, by accident I deleted some faces. Okay, I have to put those faces back in. So very simple rectangular blocks. And maybe I put in a little bit of edge rounding into those. So I bevel it, move my mouse wheel maybe once, so I have kind of like a small fillet, turn on the subsurface. And yeah, let's say this is okay, and maybe, and we can leave it this way. Okay, select everything, Control N to flip all the normals to the correct side. Then we can actually make use of the solidify modifier again, a second time. Try to scale it down, and there we have this intersection issue. So this means solidify modifier first, and rats, doesn't work. So what do we do? Well, this radius is just way too small, so there's no other way. Instead of shrinking it inside, we just let it grow to the outside. Let's see if this works. Yeah, this doesn't work as great as well. So that was a great thought. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. So I undo everything till, for example, I have this edge rounding, because I will show you what I'm going to do. Okay, you please solidify to the inside, even thickness, no rim fill because I don't want it to be solid. Let's see what happens if we give this then a subsurface, and maybe at this point then we can start seeing how far we can round this. Yeah, see there, it starts already bubbling up a little bit. So let's leave it this way. This is just our very basic input surface. The edge rounding actually then I will do in Fusion. Okay, great. So this is part one. Now let's try to get all this stuff over into Fusion. So I will select this one. I will select this one. And I think, oh, here, this one. This captures most of it. Actually, hold on, if I would like this to be nice and curved, I can actually try to build something that is getting close to the look I'm shooting for. So what I try to do here, you see this orange line, and I try to make those lines nearly parallel, because here where it cuts, then there I will put in a small fillet, but the surface nearly flows tangent into here, so the transition will be very, very easy. And for example, I think the same I should do here. So yeah. Maybe like this. Okay, perfect. So with all this selected, let's go to the subsurface and turn this one off because we don't really need it. Because we want to export everything at once, including the subsurface modifier excluded, but the mirror and solidify modifier should all work. There we are. Okay. Export wavefront, and let's say call this one Windows selection only, apply modifier. Perfect. And let's go to Fusion. Go to Sculpt, Insert Mesh. There's new window, open. And there's the stuff now. Okay. So we should maybe clean out a few parts. So maybe let's call this one car, and this stuff right now we don't need anymore. If I want to have it back in the file, I can simply re-import it, but this car body is really what I'm shooting for. And then I convert those into T-spline objects, and you see actually when it's a plane, it does not turn it into something very soft. The edges remain nice and crisp. Unfortunately also here, so we might have to change our approach there a little bit, but So hold on. Let's go to shaded edges. So those two maybe I hide for the moment. Okay, so what do I need? I do not need actually this surface, and I do not need this surface, because those two, which are still visible from the side, they actually will kind of like cut into my car body. So now I can select everything and, for example, convert those to E-wraps. That maybe. Okay. Okay, great. So, for example, let's turn the car back on. Okay, you see like where the car is roughly. Now, I can, for example, start trimming my parts. So, for example, with this one, I stitch off those front parts. So this is gone. And for example, maybe with those two, I can stitch, sorry, not stitch. Maybe I should use only one. I will, no, that's not really what I want. So how do I do this best? Okay, let's do it this way. I have the loft command, so maybe, no, hold on. Yeah, sorry, loft was correct. I just have to turn off chaining, so I can select this edge and this edge, and then do the loft command again, U and U. And the main reason is I can select now those objects, stitch them together, because when I use those as a trim command, Fusion understands where to cut something. So for example, this is now my cut object, and I would like, see, now I can select the inside out. And that's because this is kind of like a U that penetrates those two surfaces, and that's the reason why the software understands I really want to cut those two parts out. Okay, so and then U, trim this back off. So I hope maybe at this point you start seeing actually what's happening here. So, for example, maybe I delete this, and this one, and this one. And then I can go to loft, keep chaining off, and for example, loft those edges together. And basically the loft, as you can see, works like with polygon modeling, fill face. Maybe let's see if I stitch those together. If maybe I can use it for trimming. So this is my trim tool. Now I can't unfortunately cut the sides off. So I have to go back to Blender, and what I'm actually going to do now is I'm creating myself a cube, scaling this cube down, scaling it, make this thing maybe tall. I could of course also do this actually in Fusion here, to be honest, instead of re-importing something. I could create kind of like a box or a line, but this is like the process for that is what I would show you in the next class. Currently, I try to keep things more linear, so you see like one process completely finished, because right now I'm just working with surfaces that I'm creating, and those edges I can remove. Just this object now I export. There's my window part, and then convert this one to T-splines, convert it to B-wraps, because then I can use this B-wrap, for example, to cut everything off on that side. Okay. Oh, there's one more there. And I can delete this one and maybe select this part and trim all this off. Okay, perfect. So why did I do this? I need to have shared edges because now, for example, unstitch. Okay, only you I would like. No, actually, I can leave it this way. Yeah, perfect. Never mind. Just forget what I said. So I can select this flat surface and stitch off this part I modeled in Blender that overhangs. Do the same here. So you see that they meet there, but they don't really meet in a way I would say is nice and soft. So there are some transition issues. So there, and then I go ahead and, for example, for this sharp corner, add a small fillet. Ooh. So, for example, that this is nice and soft. Let's do the same here as well. Maybe 8. Okay. So I have kind of like my curved surface, and then it blends with a fillet into this linear stuff. Okay, so let's stitch all the stuff together. Because basically at this point now as you can see, I created a very linear look of my my windows, I have kind of like most of my profiles. Now I can go ahead, for example, with those surfaces I have here, and I leave them right now that they're slightly arced. Just convert those into B-wraps. And then, yeah, I use the trim command to, hopefully I can select this part, yes, and yes, cut it out, perfect. And no, yeah, unfortunately, oh, did I delete those? No, actually, I still have them here, so perfect. I shouldn't have deleted the B reps actually, because I need those a second time. So with those B reps, I of course also have to stitch the stuff off. Okay. So, because now I can use this and maybe stitch it together. And let's see if I go to trim, if I can, yeah, perfect. I can cut those parts out, you see? Now I end up with this part, and then all this I stitch back together. And now I have a complete profile that, for example, captures the shape of the window. And now I can go ahead and, for example, select all these edges. And that's where I said, like, that's now the difference between making a sketch model with polygons. So you give up precision a little bit if you need to do something that's precise, but you are really fast to explore an idea, compared to this approach where everything is more precise. But as you see, it also requires a little bit more work, but your end result will be nice and perfect. And now I can, for example, try to find a value that maybe is good. So maybe 6. Yeah, let's leave it at 6. Okay, so I have this surface now, and so you see, for example, where and how this penetrates the car. And for example, I could now tell the software to split this car body by using this window geometry. But this is actually right now only defining the windows itself, but not the frame, I think, outside. So let me go back to Blender for a second and let me double check something. Yeah, because you can see this is actually the the um the outline for the window. So what I have to do here now is I need one more of those. Just bring it over and maybe bring this one to there. And so I have to see what outline here I can use. So this lower line is actually usable for me, but this upper line I would like to offset a little bit more down. So I'm going to duplicate this object one time. I'm going to delete this surface, and then I'm changing my offset till I hit this line. Yeah, perfect. So those two surfaces I have to export now as well. So export wavefront. Yeah, I just overwrite the file. Let's go to Fusion. And go to Sculpt, insert mesh. So there is the mesh, and then let's quickly convert it. And let's convert it. Okay. And then with those B wraps in the patch mode. Actually, if you just click on the arrow, go down, and then you see this arc with an arrow. Click it, and then you have the trim tool, for example, in the menu. And I have to trim this stuff off. Nope, wrong face. There. Okay, great. And I think, yeah, this upper surface I don't really need. So let's take a look at where we are right now. There's this. Okay, this is the upper arc. Okay. I have to re-import a part. I was a little bit too quick with deleting some of my input geometry. So this selection I have to bring over. Just to make the video a little bit more easier to see, meaning all the objects I have inside here, I started deleting them a lot. So you notice that maybe as long as you're not 100% sure you can delete them, don't delete them. Otherwise, like what I'm doing here right now, you have to re-import them all the time. Normally I wouldn't do it. I would just create one folder and then put those objects in there. But just for your convenience, so this list here doesn't grow too much, I simply started to delete those more frequently, so you see more the objects I'm actually working on. Okay, well, one last time. So I think this one I don't need. This one I don't need. This one I don't need. Yep. Okay, so then patch, trim this thing off, and trim this piece off. So I'm nearly there. I am such a genius. Forgot to bring over this front face, this one. Okay, last time I have to do this. Oh, that was the wrong command. Okay, great. Now you trim this and this. Okay. Great. Okay. No, not okay. This piece is actually too close. So let me see. Yeah, this face actually defines this part. So I think I can copy and paste. Yeah, make a duplicate. And for example, move this one maybe to here. Okay, so now with this surface, I cut those off. Then the front part I can loft. Okay. With this surface, I trim the back parts off. And then I loft this. Okay. And there was another piece somewhere. Where is... Oh, no, it's still there. There it is. So this one, trim this inside out. And now with this one, trim this part and this part off. Okay, perfect. So I think at this point we can stitch all those parts together and then go to edge rounding. Or was it 3? No, I think it was 6 I used. Yeah, okay. Perfect. So what do we have? We now have perfectly generated surfaces where all these arcs are perfectly parallel with very good offsets, nice rounded corners, and everything is nice and geometrically accurate. So what we can do now, let's say this is your final piece, and I don't want to make this video necessarily much longer. We can now select those parts and, for example, start splitting. So not trimming, splitting this car body into different parts. And the command for that is actually, I think, split face or split body. I think it's split face, yeah, because we don't really have a solid here right now. We just have a surface, so split face. So let's start maybe with this part. Okay. So let's go to split face, and then it wants faces to split. Maybe selecting those that are affected by my command. Just to make sure I select those as well. Okay. And then the splitting tool. and click OK. And there now you see actually how we have those parts cut into the object. So now I think there was something missing. Let's do this one more time because I have the feeling there was a problem. Maybe I did not really have all faces correctly selected. So split face, you, and then you. Oh, yeah, those are not really affected. Okay. And then the splitting tool will be this part. So I click it. And there actually you can see kind of like the outline. Click OK. Yeah, see, this is better now. There you can see exactly the outline. So, it's going to be a little bit crazy, but maybe let's unstitch this part. So then, for example, here we can now select all the parts that actually make up, for example, the window parts, and stitch that back together. So this object and this object, let's see where in the list they are. There. So let's turn those off. So they're invisible. So you see now I cut the space out of the car. Now all this, for example, I could join back together by stitching it. Okay. Now it's a lot easier to work with or navigate through my scene because I don't have so much craziness. So let's take a look at this object. So maybe at this point, let's try to cut the windows out. So we do the same, split surface. And for example, who is who? Yeah, okay. And those are those. So split U by U. Okay, I guess this doesn't work. So split guess I have to select those by hand. And then the splitting will be this part. Okay. Yeah, and you see the same basically happened in here. So we can, for example, unstitch this and then select the correct fragment. stitch those back together. Click OK. Oh, what happened here? Oh, that's funny. Okay, maybe you stitch. Okay, one more time. Yes, I guess I... Oh, no, 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 no. What's this body? Oh yeah, you unstitch. So there, that's the way it should look like. Okay. And then all those, stitch them together. And finished. So, what do we have now? Basically, we have actually a car where, yeah, we have all the different parts precision cut out. I mean, that's just the beauty part of NURBS, because it's all math-based. It's very precise. Now, if I would like to, for example, continue, let's say I would like to make an injection mold. I mean, there's a lot more to modeling to it, so this is way not even close to it. But for example, those windows I created, I could give a certain thickness, add some kind of geometry to it to snap it into the window, and maybe make a plastic translucent print out of it. And for example, this complete car body I could shell and print maybe red plastic. This, for example, I could shell and print, and then basically later, like for my tangible model, I glue or I plug all these parts back together. So, for example, I could take parts out or in, and since this is like your first computer modeling class, there's so much more to 3D printing and all the stuff. I try to keep it rather simple. So let's say, for example, this is actually the body you would like to print. Well, let's see if actually we can give a thickness to it. So maybe -6 millimeters. So you see it's like one side. The arrow points out, so that's the reason why I punched in minus. And the software might have to calculate a little bit because I also put in a pretty big thickness, and then I switched the direction. So I'm going to stop here for a second, and when the software is done, I will continue the recording. So unfortunately, I encountered a problem with Fusion. I locked it up and I needed to force quit it. And unfortunately, even with the recovery file, all the work was lost. So I have to restart from scratch. But I think the problem I actually made was I tried to do something that's rather complicated, and I would have, I guess, a simpler way to do it. And think about it like in real life, how you would do something. You would take a block of foam, carve it, shell it out, and then when you shell it out, then you start cutting, for example, the windows out. So I will try to do exactly the same here as well. So for example, I have kind of like my body, and I have a surface that closes the lower part, and then I have a wheel that, for example, will cut into it. So I brought all this geometry already over into Fusion. And let's take a look at what we can do with stitching. So I stitch, for example, with this object, this part, and this part. And then this object, I stitch this, for example, away. Okay, so now those two objects. I would like to join. So I stitch them together into a new object. So now I have a shell, and I think with the shell I should be able to shell it out. I mean, not a shell, I have a solid. So let's see how this works. So I select this part and voila. See, maybe 10. Okay, so I created a shell for my car body. Then, actually, now after this is done, then I start cutting all the different parts out. So, for example, actually, let's see if we can do the cut. So, for example, I have the cylinder, target. This is my tool. Not sure if this actually works because it's a surface. No, of course it can't work because it's a surface. Yeah, so it's not the volume. So I could, if I want to, in this case, go to patch mode, go to loft, no, loft, not patch. Quickly fill those, go to patch. Oh, of course this can't work because this has to be joined. Join, patch, this profile, patch, this profile, you, and you, stitch together. Oh, where is it open? It says it is open somewhere. And stitch. Okay. Oh, there's an interesting surface inside. I think that was a patch command I did one step earlier. Yeah, okay, so I see now this is a solid. And with this solid, I should, in theory, be able to cut this part out. So let's see how this works. Go to model and then combine, cut. This is my target. This is my tool. Okay, some issue. Let's do it again. Combine, cut, you against you. Okay. Interestingly, there's a little bit of hangover, so this object I simply move down a little bit, just a notch. Yeah, looks like I need a little bit more. 7. Okay. Yeah, and then I can U, cut by U. Ta-da! There's now my car body with those openings. And I have, sorry, I have a shell. So this one, for example, I could send right away to the 3D printer. Now, let's make this really quick, how to cut the windows out. So I basically, like in the video before, what I have to do is find those geometry points and then cut everything out. So, sorry, in this case, yeah, let's maybe just do the thing with the windows only. And let's skip kind of like the frame part. So this is the geometry I have to export out a second time. I'm going to freeze the video at this point because you saw this already. So I'm going to continue working on this one, and then when I have everything ready in Fusion, I will come back. So here I am. I recreated quickly out of the surfaces I designed in Blender my profile surfaces inside Fusion. And here is my car body. And because this actually now has the surface thickness already added to it, it will actually be really easy to cut, for example, this stuff out. So maybe let's go to this view, turn this on, and then let's see. So instead of now split face, we actually say split body, because I'm going to use those window surfaces as kind of like a knife that cuts through my car shell and then separates the different parts. So for example, my body to split, and then the splitting object. Okay, let's see. It will take a moment to work. And yeah, there it is. So there are the different windows, nicely cut out. And there's, for example, my car body. Everything with a material thickness and ready to print. So, as I mentioned very often during the semester, only because it's a software does not necessarily mean that everything will be very easy, because a software can also only do everything based on the way how you tell it to do. And then, for example, NURB surfacing is different than working with clay. It's all an approximation. So as you notice, even in my case, I needed to backtrack because the initial approach I selected didn't really work out. But then with a little bit of trial and error, I figured out an approach that actually works better with the way how the software thinks. And if you as a student have that issue, don't be ashamed. It also happens to professionals who do this stuff for a really long time. Because sometimes you follow into a certain work pattern or habit. But as you can see, sometimes just a different approach or a different order, and then you still get the result you want. Now to export actually this car body, given the fact that this is also in the correct scale, you could, for example, right click on this body and then say save as STL. Let's make a preview. The preview is going to create a mesh so I can see the polygon mesh. There are certain, how could I say that, refinement options, but for the beginning, maybe simply use medium. Low will be a really coarse one, high will be very precise, but then the model will be very, very complex. So since we print with the Z-Core printer, medium will be, I think, more than sufficient because very fine details the printer can't print anyway. Yeah, and then you simply click on OK, give it a name, select a location, click Save, and then you can bring it down to the wood shop and feed it to the Z Core printer and print it. And that's everything that's to it.